Good morning, everybody. So, yep, I'm up. It's 6:01. I was up at 5 and I was I'm on a total very strict schedule, it seems. Last night I tried to watch the State of the Union address and I started nodding off around 10 and then I didn't finish hearing the speech. So I just woke up a little bit around 11 to the feedback from the SOTU. And so I'm sure it was more of the same that we've heard, and that's fine. But I'm on a really my circadian rhythms is very perfect. And my system, when I eat certain foods, if it doesn't like it, it definitely takes a minute for it to process. So I am very aware of almost everything. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So now here's a different perspective. Let's come from. Now we understand that there are three things that kill us. There are also three things that keep us alive. So instead of coming from the death standpoint all the time, but I wanted to make sure that you guys knew what caused your death, but also now what causes life, what keeps the balance, what keeps everything going, because we have to have these three things. These are three things that aren't like foreign objects. Okay? So there's only two absolutes on earth. Two absolutes is life and death. And we learned that yesterday. That right now our world in the matrix and the alternative matrix is all about death, but they are mistaking some of the activities on that death trajectory as life. Okay, now it's very difficult to say and predict what tomorrow brings, but it seems that we are seeing a pattern out there, which are people dying. So if there's an already established pattern and an expectation, then that is the prediction. And it seems that our practices in the matrix and the alternative matrix is the end result of death. So, but also life too, because somebody may have certain issues with some of these three things, and they will use one of those three things to prolong your life, but still with the expectation of death. So whether it's chiropractic type practices, whether it's hospitals, whether it's pharmaceuticals, pills, powder, supplements, all of that, they may extend your current life for a few days, a few years, but there's still that expectation that you do die. Okay? So now we need to understand, and this is going to help me as well as Bridget and Kevin, anyone else that wants to present this to people, is that there are three things that keep life in balance if it's in balance. And there are three things that cause death if it's imbalanced or unbalanced. And those three things are antibodies, NK cells, T cells, lymphocytes, yeast/Candida, and then hormones. Because if I come from the standpoint that the three things that kill you, that was the perspective I came from as we were discovering all this, then someone's going to think that they're not supposed to have any antibodies or NK cells or T cells or lymphocytes. They think they can't have any yeast or Candida, or they think they can't have any hormones come into surface. And that is simply not so. It is a balance of all those three things that keep you alive indefinitely. But in order for that to happen, there has to be the conditions that are favorable for those things to keep each other in balance. And that's where we looked at Jilly Juice, and we're seeing the results of that balance. Can we obviously predict that we're going to live forever? Obviously not. But could we predict when someone's going to die? No, but we can look at patterns. We can look at already established patterns and lifestyles. Even though someone brings in a biochemistry that you may or may not be aware of, you are still seeing the current patterns in your own families. Women are getting menopause around 40, 50, 60. Men are losing their hair and getting a gut. I mean, these are things that aren't a mystery in life. This is obviously right there in front of you. we have grandparents that may live to be 80 or 90, but then they're dying. You see people age, you see people start graying, having gray hair at 40. So we're already seeing the signs of the death trajectory. We don't need to say, well, how do you know what's going to happen tomorrow? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we see the signs today. And when you see signs of your hair going gray, you're on that death trajectory. When you see your skin start sagging, and not because you walked into a really bad area and then you got a malfunction or a mutation, like immediately, no, you start seeing your body breaking down. That is a sign of a death trajectory. And that's already an established pattern in the matrix and in the alternative matrix. So if somebody proposes that there is a possibility of indefinite life, if you don't completely overwhelm your system with all the different protocols out there, then that is a possibility that a person could consider. It's not something that is like out of the question. It's not something you can say, well, is there any proof? Is there any proof? Well, when you look at the mentality and the practices and the belief system of the death process, and you're seeing signs of people going gray and people dying, and you have different generations alive, well, right there is obvious. There is all the evidence there, and the perception of what pain is and what people do to mitigate pain. So then you reintroduce what pain is. You start putting together what keeps people alive, even for the short amount of time. And you hear about probiotics, you hear about the good bacteria, the live food, not the dead food, but the live food, that is lactobacillus. And then you know that cruciferous vegetables and fruits and all of those are good for you. I mean, that's just a common knowledge. And then, water, you need water. And then you also need salt. You need good pink Himalayan salt with trace minerals, because that contributes to the electrolytes, the bioelectricity in your body. And you put all those three things together, which is lacto-fermented cabbage juice or kale. And you've already heard that fermentation is huge, but there's different types of fermentation out there that some are not very good for you. You heard about probiotics out there, which are some are not good for you. So now it's distinguishing which fermentation, and then is it sugar, is it milk, or is it salt? And then we've established that milk is too many hormones and it has a lot of sugar, and fermenting fruit creates pure sugar, and that feeds Candida, that feeds cancer. So those two are ruled out. So the only thing left is the salt. Salt has been used for centuries for so many different things, for stabilizing somebody in the hospital along with a little bit of sugar. So there you go. So now here is a formula, a recipe, along with then understanding the perception and changing your perception on pain, and understanding what they do in the death trajectory matrix to deal with pain, and then say, hey, wait, hold on a second. If they're using specific agents that are poisonous, that then create mutations to then elicit a hormone, and then someone feels anesthetized, is that really what we should be doing? And it shows them on a death trajectory. You see a lot of drug addicts out there that do this, that do that very thing. They have mutations, sickness. They go to their doctor because they have a mutation, and the doctor gives them drugs. Those drugs are basically hormone replacement therapies, but it is actually a poison that creates another mutation, which is our side effects, which then elicit that alleged painkiller effect, or keeping you balanced and feeling somewhat normal. Okay, so now you're looking at this protocol with a different lens, with a different intention, with a different everything, and it's on a life trajectory, because everything is alive with this protocol. So then it could stand to reason that indefinite life is not out of the question. So this is absolutely paramount that I do come from this standpoint now, because now people will understand that, yeah, if you have too many antibodies and NK cells and lymphocytes and T cells, that's based upon poisons, based upon the accumulation, the antibody acquisition protocols that are out there, which is in the holistic market as well as the allopathic. You get too many of those, you potentially hit autoimmunity, you age, and those cells do attack good tissues, not just the pathogens that what caused it to come to fruition to begin with, but it also attacks good tissue. and then it starts tearing down the already mutated organs. And some of them are your vital organs. And that's why some women die from heart attacks. That's why some men die from heart attacks, because their lifestyle and the too many NK cells, antibody acquisitions, finally broke the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeast, Candida, you need that. I mean, antibodies, you need that too, but not too many. Yeast, you need it because that's what cleans up your system from sugar and sugar substitutes, heavy metals. But if you overfeed it, it turns into a fungus and it takes over. But you need a certain amount of it to keep the balance in the body. Hormones, you need hormones too. We talked about chakras and energies and biochemistry and all of this stuff, right? Hormones are necessary too, but you're not supposed to be manipulating your hormones to elicit a specific type of behavior or elicit a specific type of physical manifestation, like lifting weights or being more aggressive or being more focused. Hormones are only there to keep everything in balance. That's why when you look at the body, mind, and spirit, the spirit are actually hormones. There's no one specific hormone that is supposed to be more manipulated than the rest. No, it's a balance of all the hormones, because all the hormones are based upon the nutrients, the vitamins that they talk about. Okay, those vitamins are really having to do with hormones. They're basically compartmentalized hormone inducers. They're poisons. That's what vitamins are. They're actually poisons because they elicit a behavior from a hormone based upon a natural, or based upon antigen that creates antibodies, which then elicit a hormone. Okay? I know it's very confusing, but hormones are only there to keep the balance, to keep everything going and working smoothly, to regenerate cells and organs and keep mental clarity and keep the person from degrading. But you have too many hormones all the time, because hormones are also there to protect the body, to keep the species going so you don't risk extinction. But what I found is people are living off of hormones as if it was life, and it's not. It's actually a death process. But it doesn't kill you right away. That's what the confusion is out there in the allopathic holistic, is that since the person doesn't die right then and there using a hormone, it doesn't mean that over time, with that hormone being triggered on a daily basis, that it's not going to then eventually put too much pressure on the vital organs that are not regenerating at the level that they should be, so a person doesn't risk a heart attack or something else. Okay, and so yeah, it also is relative excuse me, to what you bring to the table. If you're coming in with mutations and then you go straight into the cannabis world or go straight into the holistic world, the detox world, and the pharmaceuticals world, yeah, you are shortening your lifespan because you're taking in poisons that's causing mutations that is eliciting hormones. When somebody is never sick in their childhood and you know there's new diseases that are coming out, not just because your parents were vaccinated, which is great, not really, but hey, you know, it's fine. It happens because you are exposed to an environment that's full of pathogens, but there's always new diseases that are out there, and most likely your parents didn't get all 24 strains of the measles. So if a person never gets sick in their childhood and they're in the public, they're not in a bubble, then it means they have an overactive immune system, which it may seem great. The kid's never sick. They're on point in school. They're abiding by all the rules. They go into college. They're just like a little genius. And then all of a sudden you see something like Steve Jobs dying at age 50. You're seeing people start contracting autoimmune disorders in their 30s. Yeah, they were a great model student in their childhood and maybe in their teens, but the body can't handle that many hormones being induced because of all those antibodies, because of all the vaccines and then all the pathogens they were exposed to. Not everybody has that certain outcome where they just never get sick in their childhood. But when it happens, that's why people don't get concerned about the vaccines. So that's the standpoint you have to come from, is that because every body out there that mixes in the general population in our community has not been vaccinated or have all the antibodies to every single disease on this earth. And we're always mixing in with different people with different strains. That's why the flu shot isn't very effective, because it's only for one specific strain. There are probably other strains out there that are floating around, and that's why people are sick. Or this new strain that they're giving a vaccine for is a strain that one body hadn't recognized. So essentially, yeah, herd immunity does exist, but it doesn't stop you from getting sick. The whole point is for you to get sick, but their platform is that, yes, we're going to give you a mild form of the virus, not a live virus. It's attenuated or an inactive virus, and it's supposed to build antibodies, but you still suffer the mutation. If you've never been exposed to that type of pathogen, even in an inactive form, you will have some kind of reaction, inflammation. Okay? So anybody that tells you, oh, my kid never gets sick and they've been vaccinated, or they never been vaccinated, and who knows if maybe the kid came in with an overactive immune system because a mother had her own practices and mutations. And so the kid's already been exposed to most of the stuff out there, but then maybe see, that's the thing, is kids that have never been vaccinated will get sick if that's the practice, because it means that, yes, somebody didn't try to energize their immune system way early on out in the gate. Even though the kid came in with mutations, just like the mother, you get another vaccine, it will then energize the immune system yet once again and create natural killer cells. Also, the kid will suffer a mutation, and that could potentially put them on the track of autoimmunity, which might look like, oh, my kid's always healthy, never gets sick. But then that strain and that stress will eventually come to surface, and then the kid will turn into an adult who will then have a disorder. Whether it's Raynaud's disease, lupus, MS, fibromyalgia, scoliosis, any of these crazy, growth or types of autoimmune disease or even deformities is predicated on the mutations the mother passed on, the natural immunity through breast milk, as well as the vaccines, as well as also being exposed to vaccinated people. Because even the non-vaxxers don't understand balance. They think they do. They're like, oh yeah, elderberry syrup or vegan and vegetarian. Oh, my kid eats all their vegetables. But they already have mutations from the mother. And they're being exposed to the kids that have been vaccinated. They're not in a bubble. They're not staying at home in a bubble, in a sterile environment. No, they're going to school. They're going on play dates. They're exposed to kids who are shedding. So they're going to suffer those mutations. And then the mother's like, oh, I'll just take elderberry syrup or some kind of detox or some kind of whatever they've been told by their naturopathic. And it creates more natural killer cells, no different than as if they were to get a vaccine. Okay? So it's like, now we have to understand that it is all about balance. What would kill you also would keep you alive. That's what the insane thing is. This is like such a paradox that the mainstream alternative and the mainstream can't even wrap their freaking mind around this. But what keeps you alive will also kill you if you're not keeping the balance. And right now, the mainstream is all about antibody acquisition, and then it's putting everybody on a death trajectory, no matter if you're non-vaxxer or pro-vaxxer. If you're pro-antibody, it doesn't matter what platform, political persuasion you subscribe to. The end result's always going to be the same because your intention, your perception are always the same. You believe people should die. So, yeah, then it's just a matter of manufactured differences. The pro-vax and the anti-vax, they really need to join forces and be anti-antibody. But they're joining forces pro-antibody, but then they're fighting amongst each other. That's like the crazy psychological operations that are going on, the manipulations. They really have the pro-vax and the anti-vax on the same playing field, working on the same side. They're not even opposite sides of the playing field. Like if there's a football, they're on the same side. They don't even realize it. They're both on the same side. They're both antibody-inducing type platforms. So the two absolutes is life and death. If you believe in death, then it doesn't matter what you believe in. Stop your activism. It's a waste of time. Just live your life. And then if you choose to die, then you choose to die. It's people's choices, how they want to die. It's not up to you. If somebody wants to die, it's not up to you to tell them they should not get a vaccine. No different than they should tell you to stop taking natural remedies or all of those cannabis or whatever else. Okay? But if you want to live, then there's a totally different mentality that you're going to have to adopt that's going to be completely opposite of both of those two platforms. And since we've only been told two manufactured superficial differences, now the whole indefinite life is the third thing, the third party, that people are going like, what the hell? You're just putting a monkey wrench in this whole plan. And it is completely like challenging a lot of business models. You know, the organoid industry, the holistic industry. You know, what is ascension really? I mean, is ascension death? It seems that when people practice alchemy, they are practicing trying to revive the dead or kill people. That's what alchemy is. It's the extreme on both ends, like turning water into wine, that type of thing. And no, we're not doing that kind of crazy transformation. We're not bringing back the dead, and we're not trying to kill people. So alchemy is really only for the death trajectory. So when someone says, oh, it's all about alchemy, I'm an alchemist, and they claim to be all about life, that is absolutely not correct. They're not about life. Anyone that believes that people should die and that their meat suit is not meant to live forever, they are still buying into the pro-vax allopathic party line, even under the guise of all their chakras and crystals and orgonites and meditative practices. Now, if you are practicing meditation and you're doing Jilly Juice, I can understand using your mind with Jilly Juice to help alleviate some of the healing symptoms, because it can be very, very difficult to deal with pain. But at least you're not taking in natural killer cells. Yes, you're utilizing your own hormones that you have in your body when you really shouldn't be bringing up hormones on a continuous basis. However, we know that there has to be that transition point. When you are healing, you're in pain. Some people are in pain a lot. So they need to find a way where they're not taking in poisons. But hey, if you're using your own body to kind of help you out a little bit, okay, that's much better than taking a poison to create a mutation. But still, you bringing up hormones, no matter what venue, for a specific purpose, is not really ideal, but it's necessary during the healing process. And so I totally completely acknowledge that the holistic industry and the allopathic industry, both, not just one, but both, have a place. But it's not for somebody to get well. At this point, from my perspective, using the allopathic and the holistic industry is just purely for a transition point. It is not the end-all be-all. And that's where our society has gotten lost, that the holistic and the allopathic is their end-all be-all, because they still expect death as their end result, even though they want to be somewhat comfortable while they're in pain, because the body is screaming to live and you're trying to stop it. So, you know, Jilly Juice, you know, I do want to be tolerant of the other side. Yes, that death is something that is natural, but it's not something that is the only way. And I think that's where I'm coming from, is death is not always going to be the only way. And that is the religion that's out there. The religion of death needs to be challenged. And I am trying to challenge it. And yeah, I get a lot of bad reviews about that, because people have been accepting death as something as expected. And now there's somebody that's challenging that religion. That's very difficult. That's just like your religion that you guys have, either Jewish, Christianity, atheist, something else. When someone challenges your religion, it's very easy to reject it. But you say you want to live, you say you're tired of suffering, well, you're going to have to then adopt and explore something that could potentially help you stop suffering, which means that it's not going to be another cure that's out there on the market. It's going to be now exploring what is life, what is pain, and what are the three things that will keep you alive as well as kill you. And that was hard for me to even, like, I'm thinking like this morning, I woke up this morning and I'm just thinking like, what am I going to talk about today? Because every morning, every single day, I think about, what am I going to speak to the people today? What am I going to say to Facebook today? And, and I spoke to Kevin for about an hour last night, because Kevin comes from the perspective of the energy healing, which is great, because that whole energy healing is also really about hormones. So he's using something that's already part of our body that isn't taking in a poison. So he's taking out some of the middleman and utilizing the hormones in our body to help alleviate some of the healing symptoms. And that's wonderful. And there are practices out there that do just that. They're not using the middleman to then elicit a hormone. They're using what already the body has developed. But we know that's only half of the piece of the puzzle. Now it's understanding the role of nutrition with a very different outcome, not the aging process, but the continuous life process. So I'm thinking like, okay, so what perspective might I come from now with these three things? Oh, wait, hold on a second. Him and I have argued back and forth because, we have a language barrier. I mean, he's from Belgium, and sometimes the way he jokes, I don't always take well, and I know that, and that's something that I need to work on, is learning how to just stop being triggered, and that's why. But he knows how to take, my like, huh, what the hell? But it makes sense. He's trying to bridge the gap between the holistic / energy, but foregoing the poisons and learning only how to use the hormones to help heal the pain a little bit. Not so much heal as far as trying to like create a indefinite life just using hormones, but as a transition point. So when you are taking jelly juice and healing, and you are an insomniac, or you do have a major amount of pain, what practices can you do without taking pills, powders, and supplements that will then help that transition process? But then I also acknowledge that I know people are going to take cannabis, they're going to take their Tylenol, they're going to take whatever they're used to taking in the allopathic, they're going to go get their root canals, they're going to do things in the system because that's what they feel comfortable with, but yet they still want to do jelly juice, and I'm okay with that. It's nothing wrong if you have to take your drugs and you are addicted, and they're prescription drugs and they're psychoactive and they're very, very strong, and nobody should ever get off of any drugs cold turkey. Okay? There is a point of transition, and I understand that. Some people are forced to because of their addictions. Others have so much pain that they need to use certain things that they're used to, that they know that they can rely on, and to help them transition. As long as the intention is that they don't rely on that forever, then it doesn't matter. So I have been very divisive over the last 6 months about the holistic and the allopathic for a reason, because we have to understand the distinct differences between the three. Even though the allopathic holistic are two sides of the same coin, they both are selling you the same thing, but they're packaged differently. And so people think that they're different when really they're not. But it comes down to not the words and the marketing, but it comes down to actual chemistry. It comes down to actual science. And it's very difficult to take something that's not very science-minded and only looks at words, and that's all they look at. And so either they be open enough to take on new information and study things beyond just a written word, but how it's being used, and how many different words for the same thing relative to the reader, the perspective. When you have chakras for the ascension, biochemistry for the science, energy for the energy healers, hormones for like the science. When you have so many different words, and then maybe in the Catholic religion, which I haven't really studied too much, or the Jewish religion has another name for the hormones. So if you're studying all the different religions and all the different thought processes, and they talk about the spirit of sorts, they're talking about the hormones. What makes up a person? It's how their hormones are being played out. So that's what people who are trying to explore a different thought process and they're looking to change the outcome, they got to be open to then understanding that everything is based upon a very universal foundation. which is humans are all the same. We have an innate and adaptive immune system with 11 different systems. At this point, only male and female. We have different shades of a combinations of the two, which is perfectly great, but it still comes down to male and female as the prototypes. Okay? And then we know that things happen in our society that cause the different shades of differences and the diversity, and there is nothing wrong with that because it's biochemistry. Your biochemistry and all that make you who you are, and there's nothing wrong with it until you feel there's something wrong with it. And if the death is the end result, then maybe, and you're tired of suffering and you want to explore the potential of indefinite life, then it would have to then challenge everything you thought you knew as far as who you are. Now, I'm not saying that who you are is bad, but if you're not happy, then you have the possibility to change who you are. Not necessarily completely just eradicate who you've been, but change how you behave, change your physical manifestations. You know, when you're growing tumors all the time, getting them cut off, that must be a pain in the ass for some people. Having to get the skin tags cut off and the tumors cut off and burned off. So maybe there's a way to change your biochemistry to where and it's not taking hormones or taking NK cells acquisition. There's something else that is a root cause that's causing these tumors and these skin tags to always be cropping up. No matter what you do, no matter what drug you take, no matter what topical you use, those skin tags or some other issues are so it'll take a person to really be open to saying, hey, because when I started this protocol, I was a very different person. I'm still Jillian, but I was triggered, I was moody, I would say people say hormonal. I was also progressively becoming more and more obese. You can see the inflammation in my face, aging, and had a lot of digestive issues, a lot of cravings, sleeping a lot. So, but that wasn't who I was. It was just the way the imbalances in my body. Who I was, Jillian, was still the same person. I didn't completely eradicate who Jillian is. I just eradicated the things that were causing me to suffer and behave and not fulfill my goals and dreams. That was the only change that I made. So I'm still the same person at 2.5 years on this Jilly Juice. I didn't forget any of the skills that I had. If anything, I enhanced the skills that I already had. If anything, I'm a bit sharp. I'm the best version of what Jillian is at this point. That's all you're doing. So you're not changing who you are. You're just making a 1,000% better version of who you are. But that is peeling back the layers of programming day by day and being okay with where you are. There's nothing wrong with where you are. If you just keep taking in the right elements and you keep understanding the pain and you stick with the diet, as close as you can, but we know people do go off because of addictions, then eventually you will get to the best version of yourself. But it does take time. You're going to have to plan. You still got to maintain your current life in the matrix. You still got to keep your mouth shut when people are talking about stuff that is totally wrong. But what are you going to say? You're going to totally completely blow them out of the water with like, hey, immortality is cool, right? I mean, there's ways of which you can exemplify your belief system, but it does take time. It's not something that happens like that. Believe me, I wish I was able to then prove to everybody a couple of years ago, but time is the proof. And luckily I do this on Facebook Live almost every day. I didn't do it every day in the beginning because I had to go through my own healing process. But lately it's been like every single freaking day. It's insane. And I'm up now at 5 a.m, starting to nod off around 9 and 10 o'clock at night. Even trying to watch the State of the Union last night, I couldn't even stay up. So yeah, I mean, I'm on a very interesting, circadian rhythm, and it's really, really awesome, and I love it. And I do get a lot more done. I'm more focused. And it's vastly different than where I was a few years ago. So that's all that's available for all of you, but you got to go through that morphine process, and it ain't always fun. But if you can get through it, the benefits, the unintended benefits are going to outweigh what you came into this protocol for. It really is. I started this trying to go after my PMDD, and I ended up getting like potential immortality. I got a better version of myself. Not everybody is going to be able to get that because they're not going to be able to get their mind around the potential and the possibility of what this protocol can do. And I couldn't even dream of this. This was not even in any plan in the beginning when I first tried to explore what was causing my issues. Because I came from the Candida standpoint, because that was what was big in the holistic world, because that's where I was trained in. Not like formally trained, but that was my focus for a few years because I was tired of the allopathic world. So naturally, they gave me another option that wasn't really that different, but it was packaged differently. Okay, it's like Tide revamping their image. It's still Tide, but they had to kind of, people are getting tired of the old marketing, the old labels, the old colors, or still the same colors, but the old stuff. So then these products like Ivory and Tide and all this, they revamp their image so it seems new when it really is the same stuff. Or they add in a few extra ingredients to kind of make it seem like it's new and improved, but it's still the same thing. So that's what the holistic industry is. It's just a revamping of the allopathic pharmaceuticals world. Instead of creating these really cold-looking pills and supplement caplets or drinks like syrups, now they're like, oh, we're not going to process it as much. We'll represent it or present it in the more unprocessed form and call it something different. So that's what I bought into, is that I came from the biotech world. I came from the prescription drugs world. I came from taking Claritin for my allergies every day, to taking Triaminic, to taking the vitamin C chewables for kids, ascorbic acid, every single day as a kid in the wintertime. To then getting tired of that, to then transitioning to the holistic industry where they're not creating those pills and powders, but the supplements and the different plants and the different plant-based therapies and drugs. And then we have these naturopathic doctors and homeopathic doctors that are trained to sell that to you against the lab portion of those pills and those prescription drugs. And they say it's something different when really the elements, when you get down to the actual root element, they're the same stuff. It's poisons. And they're taking, DNA and yeast and all these different things to do experiments, and then to do all the stuff in biotech, the protein docking. And they experiment to figure out with what element, with what human tissue, what will then be the if-then programs. If they do this, this, and this, how will that manifest in mice? Which will then, how will that manifest in humans? And then they roll it out. But they say it's not 100%. Here are the side effects. What are the side effects? Is because it's going to destroy other systems while it's trying to figure out how to manage that one system that you came in for. Okay, so that's what I got lost in, was in the holistic world. So I came from the Candida aspect because that was what their focus was. And then it branched out to not only Candida, but then too many natural killer cells, antibodies, which creates the autoimmunity, and then a hormonal imbalance, because we see it with diabetics taking insulin and everything else. If people are become sex addicts, then there's some versions that are not so extreme. And then we see relationships and families and things break up because of all these different diseases that have hormonal imbalances and they're on prescription drugs. And then fertility, and then it just goes down the line. So that's where I came. And then over the last 2.5 years of all of the controversy was then what catapulted me into the next level of more research, more connecting the dots. All of you guys were instrumental in us connecting the dots. Because when you're at home and you're only listening to academia, they're doing their own peer reviews. They're doing their own experiments of sorts. They're getting feedback from their own peers, and they keep it strictly within their own circles, tight circles. You got to have a degree and you got to have a membership to be able to take part in those research type facilities. So what did we do? We created a group and we just talked amongst each other. It's not like I'm going to get this type of information from my family. They don't even talk about my parents didn't talk about how much they made in our family. What makes you think they're going to talk about all of their diseases that they have and their mutations or their sexual habits? No. So you don't ever get that type of really critical information from your friends and family because everybody's too afraid to divulge what they're dealing with. So nobody knows how to connect any dots because no one talks about this stuff because it's too private and too embarrassing. But when you go on Facebook and you're relatively feeling like anonymous and private behind your profile, people are more apt to be more honest. And they talk about stuff. And it feels safe because they are strangers, not someone you're going to meet every day and see at work or see at your house. It's a stranger who doesn't know where you live for the most part. But it's not someone that you interact with on a daily basis. So you can say, yeah, I dealt with this, I dealt with that. And you don't feel you don't feel threatened at all. And so honesty, and that's why we have so much trolling and so many, attacks, because people are so comfortable behind the computer. So it works on both ends to be more honest and give information, to give data for then someone to figure out a thesis. But it also, on the other end of it, you get attacked more because people are still very comfortable and private behind their screen. So it's a double-edged sword, but I'm willing to take the good with the bad. That's algebra. What you do to one side, the equal sign, you do to the other. Was it as above, so below? I mean, you can name all these different things, right? I mean, that's again the same thing that has different names and different terms. People think that as above, so below is satanic. Well, how is algebra satanic? What you do to one side, the equal sign, you do to the other. It's all the same stuff. When you deal with honesty on Facebook and you're dealing with camaraderie, you're also going to be dealing with trolls. You get the yin and the yang of everything. So that's what then catapulted this, is because of the feedback. Communication is totally paramount, and it's key to then jumping to the next level. When no one talks to each other, then how do you at all figure out what your differences are and why, and figure out then what your similarities are as well? But there are times when, communication is not really great because it turns into somebody trying to impose their view. So then it becomes too extreme. So communication can be great when you're sharing information, but then it becomes extreme when you have extremists that don't have any boundaries, that want to impose their views. And that's when you have to put on the brakes and say, hey, that's just too much communicating for me today. I don't like the way you're communicating. And then you have boundaries. And that's what you learn on this protocol, is you learn how to establish boundaries so you don't have people running all over you with their religion, their political belief system, or their disgust because they don't agree with you. Then you learn how to protect yourself electronically, financially, and physically, and mentally, and spiritually, hormonally. So that way you can still be a viable system with a thought process without feeling like you're in danger from all these crazy attacks. And that does come with time. And not everybody can handle it because they're not willing to peel back those layers and be intentional. And some will and some won't. But at least now you have the opportunity, which you didn't have before. Okay? So that was a major revelation for me this morning, was the fact that antibodies, yeast, and hormones can kill you, but also keep you alive. It's just a matter of balance. How do you achieve balance? It's circulated in the right context, the right elements, and having a different outcome or different intention for an outcome. And so there's two absolutes in the world, life and death. And we already have the evidence to show what death is and then what leads up to death. And now we understand and isolate what leads up to life, and we have that opportunity for indefinite life. And that's it. I'm not saying that we can be immortal. I'm just saying that you can now change the intention to then change the outcome. All right. That's all I got to say. You guys have a great day. Thanks a lot for listening. All right. Bye-bye.